whatever, like you passed out and then you wake up and they're like, no, 3 weeks have gone by. Look, and you're like, what? Like, I'm doing that thing that when you wave your hands really fast before you cry. Like, how? I can't even imagine.
No. And a lot of people have accused her of faking it, like to the point she almost changed her name. Like she just didn't want to be Hannah anymore. But she didn't obviously end up changing her name. Barbara said, her mom, that the more she read about Fuge, the less she understood it, which is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Hannah thought, this is kind of interesting, but the only thing Hannah thought that had been strange right before, that may have been like traumatic, quote unquote, was that right before this happened, she spent about 2 days where she kind of just sat in her apartment, didn't talk to anyone, didn't do anything, like zoned out, like had no human connection. During that time, her bank records show she went to a movie, but she can't remember going to a movie. So she thinks maybe that triggered something.
Yeah.
I'm not, that's just her thought. What adds to a level of weird eeriness, like this part creeped me out, doctors and her family believe that even though Hannah didn't know who she was during those 3 weeks that she was missing, on some level she knew she was being searched for. They think Hannah felt hunted because she literally spent these 3 weeks, from what they can tell, like roaming all over the place, not staying put. Like she's still living this weird life and she's moving and she's going to all these different places. Like they think she knew on some level.
She must have had an ATM debit card on her because she left her purse and everything. And if it shows she went to the movies and stuff.
Oh, that was before she went missing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She had no cards with her. So she must have had cash or got money from someone for like going to Starbucks or whatever.
How did she eat and stuff?
Yeah. Well, so I didn't write this down, but I do remember from my research. So one thing that one of her friends thought of, because that's what people were wondering, right? How did she eat and survive for 3 weeks? One of her friends brought up a really interesting point and said that like a couple months, it was weeks or months or something, Hannah and a group of friends had gone to this like seminar or something that was about like minimalism and not using a ton of waste, and there were a lot of tips, and some of them were like, you can go to restaurants and if it gets to a certain point, like they can't sell food, so they might, like too late in the day, so they might give it to you for free. So they were like, oh, she went missing right after this, so she would have had like these tips and tricks to go to restaurants or like hang out right when they're going to throw food away and like know when,
which is true. I've went to restaurants and ordered not in a rude amount of time, but before they close, and they're like, hey, these cookies have to be thrown out. Do you want them? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing they talked about at this seminar. Yeah. So her friend was like, that's probably what she's been doing.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Her brother met with the captain who found her to find out more about the currents that day and exactly where she was found. And the two of them concluded that Hannah likely went into the river around Lower Manhattan, and then it brought her south.
Yeah.
Dan took Hannah to the pier to try to jog any memories. She said she remembered lights floating in the river. Like that's the only thing that came to her. So Dan starts looking into events, and he learned that on September 11th, so a few days before she was found, there had been a Japanese floating lantern ceremony to honor victims of the World Trade Center attacks.
Sure.
And so it's 3 days later, she must have come back to the same spot and ended up in the water.
Oh, and she might remember the lanterns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just weird. Hannah, for obvious reasons, wanted to just move on from this. She didn't like therapy. She said she preferred to talk to her friends. She said that other people could spend their time trying to find out what happened, but she wasn't going to focus on it. Like she's just going to move on with her life.
I get that, but girl, therapy can help.
Yeah.
Oh, that hurts my heart.
I know. A year after her disappearance, Hannah left New York and joined her mom in Pennsylvania, working in the kitchen at Pendle Hill, which they call the Mecca for Quakers. So her mom is like full Quaker now.
Wow. Okay.
So she is working in the kitchen at Pendle Hill. She attends daily meetings for worship, which consist of half an hour of silence, which is not something I could do.
We've tested it.
I can't go 30 seconds.
Sarah tested, Caitlin disapproved.
A friend later recalled, and this was at Pendle Hill, that Hannah was so attentive to people's needs that it sometimes felt hard to reciprocate. She said, quote, you'd come out of a 2-hour conversation that you'd feel was incredibly deep, and you'd feel heard and known and seen. And then you'd realize later, she didn't tell me anything about herself.
Oh,
like Hannah was just one of those people.
She should have been a therapist.
I know. She just only focused on other people,
Oh.
which kind of makes sense why she didn't like therapy. She didn't like the focus on her.
Yeah.
After 3 years here at Pendle Hill, Hannah accepted a teaching job in Maryland at a Montessori school. So she moved to Maryland. On the first morning of classes, Barbara received a call from police. Hannah's phone, wallet, and purse had been found on a wooded, walking path. A coworker reported seeing Hannah drive to work, but then saw her walking in the opposite direction away from the school.
So she must have had another fugue, like a flare-up, or I'm not sure what it would be. Attack.
Yeah, like something triggering.
Yeah.
The next day, around 10:30 p.m., Barbara got a phone call, and all she heard was, "Mom?" asking a question.
Oh.
Hannah had woken up in a dirty creek 1.5 miles away from the school, not knowing what happened.
Oh, that's creepy.
Later, Hannah and her mom looked at texts that Hannah had sent that day that she went missing. She didn't remember writing them. Her mom said reading the text, she could kind of tell when Hannah changed.
Yeah.
This time it was only 2 days. It wasn't 20, but she spent 2 days just walking around until she woke up in a creek and then remembered who she was. And both disappearances have super eerie similarities. They both were on the first day of a teaching job, first day of school. They were both, which I didn't talk about this, but both of these were right after she had visited her father. A lot of people wondered if visiting her dad was the trigger for these, like not being school or whatever, but it was that.
But what if it was something that happened with him on the first day of school at some point?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we can speculate all day long, but yeah, wow.
Her dad just said he didn't like this explanation, that traveling was normal and not disrupt, but
whatever, Dad.
I don't like her dad.
Shut up. Be quiet, Dad.
And in both, she was drawn to water. Because they don't think anyone put her in the she went to the water on her own. They're pretty sure. She went back to work and everything went back to normal. Literally her life went back to normal after this. And then a year later, she accepted a teaching job in St. Thomas, which is in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And she told everyone she's moving to paradise. She's super excited about this. A parent at the new school called Hannah the modern day Mary Poppins. People fucking love Hannah. She just, I want to know her. She took summer classes in Oregon to become a certified Montessori instructor. Yeah. And she literally poured her whole life. You can tell from Hannah's background, she kind of throws herself wholeheartedly into stuff and her faith has always been big. So a lot of people said this Montessori education kind of was her new religion. She threw everything she had into it.
Montessori is incredible. My sister's a Montessori teacher, and the whole idea, and I have a lot of friends because Montessori is really popular in Oregon. So that would make sense. Yeah. You can get lost in it because it's a new way of thinking about how we develop people as individuals. And it's very individualistic. If you don't know much about it, I would recommend looking at it if you're a parent or otherwise. It's a wonderful thing.
Do you want to give us a rundown? Because I don't know much about it.
Essentially, Montessori is seeing each person for their unique abilities. Also treating all children not like children. So for example, you give children tools that they would use as adults, but you just have extreme supervision and you let them know, hey, these tools are dangerous. We use these for this. It's a different method of explaining things to children where instead of using sippy cups, things for babies, because you have accidents, you just allow them to make those mistakes. You give them adult glass cups. They break and shatter. They learn that glass breaks and shatters. So they learn the things that they need to learn. It has a tendency to also end up being very earthly and sometimes minimalist and waste free and trying to value your resources.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's really neat.
So she's living on St. Thomas, taking classes in Oregon in the summer. So then on September 6th, 2017, Hurricane Irma hit.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Hannah and her roommates, this sounds fucking terrifying. Hannah and her roommates huddled together in their laundry while Hurricane Irma was hitting their island.
Oh, gosh.
The island of St. Thomas was destroyed. Hannah texted friends the next day when things calmed down and told them she was okay, but the island was devastated. She didn't recognize anything.
Wow.
A week later, Hannah drove to an ex-boyfriend's house looking for him, but found it empty. His landlord said he had actually just left to go catch one of the Mercy ships, which were giving residents free travel off the island. A lot of people obviously chose to leave.
Well, yeah, their houses were probably destroyed.
Yeah. So Hannah drove to the marina to say goodbye. She obviously caught him or caught up with him or whatever. So she went to say goodbye and he was like, joked like, oh, you should come with. And she was like, he said she thought about it, was like, no, like, I don't want to leave. Like, my heart is here.
Yeah.
Then news came that Hurricane Maria was said to be on the way, like that it was going to hit soon. One thing that's super weird, and it doesn't even end here, but after Hannah left the marina, after saying goodbye to her ex, her phone was never used again. But this isn't the last time she's seen. She just never uses her phone again after this day.
Wow.
So this beer is making me burpy.
You are burpy. Oh, cute little baby aftershock.
So the next day, she helped coworkers prep the school for Hurricane Maria because they know it's coming. But her coworker said she was, like, looking back, she was out of it. But who wasn't at this time? They just had a hurricane, like, lost everything. Another one was coming. So it makes sense that this wouldn't be like a red flag that she was quieter than, like, not herself.
And her boyfriend ex just left and he wanted her to go. And
it doesn't, looking back, they're like, oh yeah, she wasn't herself. But again, who wasn't at this time? Yeah.
It's like the Lars Matink thing. Like,
yeah,
he was eating salads. Who knows why?
Yeah. So again, her phone's not being used, which I think is weird, and also an off thing. But that night, Hannah's 3 roommates and her are talking, and all 3 of her roommates tell her that they are leaving. They plan on leaving the island.
Yeah.
Like they're making plans. They got to go. And Hannah's like, great, I'm staying. Like, she's adamant on staying. So the next day after this, so it's 2 days after her phone has been used, but she's been seen. A roommate sees Hannah get in her car. She said she's going to work, but she never makes it to the school. So she doesn't, this part kind of drives me crazy because she doesn't show up for school that day. But I guess with everything going on with the hurricane and everything, no one reports her missing that day. But then the next day she misses a faculty meeting, but still, like, everyone is so caught up in the hurricanes and all this stuff.
Well, I imagine a lot of people are there. They're not. They're having to deal with things in their personal life.
And a lot of people have literally just been jumping ship and leaving the island. So there's thought, like, they're not keeping track. It's not a normal life that they're living right now on this island. So
it's emergency panic situation.
Exactly. Even in this pandemic right now, if I don't hear from a friend for a couple days, I'm not as worried as I normally would be.
Yeah.
Because I know everyone's struggling right now. It's kind of that. So it wasn't until day 3, one of her friends on the island reached out to some of Hannah's friends back home, and everyone realized no one had heard from Hannah in 3 days, which even though their roommates and stuff had seen her, she hadn't used her phone. So she stopped all communication with people. The friend back home tells the friends on the island who hadn't heard anything from Hannah's past to check by the water. Because, of course, her friends back home are like, she's done this before. Like, go to the water, because that's where she goes. Like, go to the water.
You might get into this, but I feel like if I had a history like that, I might warn someone. She knows that she's not herself in those moments. So you think you'd be like, I don't know how you do it if you're embarrassed or you're unsure, you don't know. But, like, hey, sometimes I have this disassociative state and, like...
Well, but it's also been 10 years since... We're now in 2017. It's been a decade since the first one. True. Like, she literally, like... That's why this case is so weird. Like, it had been a decade.
Yeah, that is really weird.
The first 2 were close, but this one is 10 years after the first one.
Yeah.
So a group of her friends go to Sapphire Beach, which is Hannah's favorite place to snorkel and, like, hang out. And that's where they decide to start. Good place to start. So there is a small bar near the beach that served, like, burgers and mimosas and stuff. On one of the stools, they find Hannah's sundress, her sandals, and her car keys.
Oh.
They ask, and workers say they found those items in the sand and, like, gathered them up, like, while they were cleaning. But it's just very weird.
Yeah.
They find Hannah's car in the parking lot. Her purse, phone, and wallet are all inside. She's gone. Her friends get boats. They search. They know Hannah's a strong swimmer. And I know, like, obviously you'd think someone couldn't survive, and I'll get more into this, but the first time 10 years ago when she went missing, they thought she had been in the water for sure overnight. If not, they had this whole they think she might have even been in the water 2 or 3 full days, but maybe, like, swam to an island, like, stopped at different places or hung out on a buoy or whatever. But so clearly she's a strong swimmer. Like, if I go missing by the water, you can just count on it that I'm drowned. But
it's over for me and Caitlin. We can't swim. It's done.
But her friends are like, she's a strong swimmer.
She's been in the water before.
Yeah. If we take some boats out there, like, we might,
she might be
there's
there.
a good chance we could find her. So take some boats out knowing, like, she could survive days in the water. She already had. The Coast Guard, obviously the cops are called.
Yeah.
They search. The Coast Guard searched by helicopter, but there's no luck. They check the Mercy ships, but the only way they can check those is looking for Hannah's names on the logs.
Mm-hmm.
So all they know from that is Hannah's name, and I'll get into a theory from that. Hannah's name wasn't on the logs, so according to paper, she didn't get on a boat and leave.
It's like the Sam Sayers. They knew she went on the trail because she put her name on the register. Yeah.
After 3 days,